In a landmark decision, a federal appeals court has struck down the legal foundation of the Trump administration's sweeping tariffs, sending shockwaves through the political and economic landscape. This ruling upends a core pillar of the administration's trade policy, casting uncertainty over years of economic strategy and international negotiations. The October 8, 2025 decision directly challenges the broad use of executive power to impose tariffs under the guise of national emergency, questioning the very limits of presidential authority. Billions in taxes on imports, originally intended to protect American industry and jobs, are now in question, as the court scrutinizes the constitutional boundaries of executive action. The decision has ignited a national debate. Where does a president's power to defend national security end, and Congress's constitutional authority over commerce begin? The answer could reshape the balance of power for generations. Businesses and trade groups argued the tariffs were an unconstitutional overreach, a way to bypass Congress for a protectionist agenda that hurt consumers and global relationships. Today, the court sided with the challengers, fundamentally altering the playbook for future presidents and setting a precedent that will influence how trade policy is crafted and enforced. This is more than a legal technicality. It's a pivotal moment for American economic policy, the separation of powers, and the ongoing debate over the reach of executive authority. The aftershocks of this decision will be felt for years to come, shaping the future of American governance and its role in the global economy. To grasp the court's decision, we must revisit Trump's radical trade strategy. He invoked national emergency powers, specifically Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, to impose tariffs, bypassing Congress and traditional negotiations. The first targets, steel and aluminum, justified as vital to national security. The tariffs became a symbol of the America First agenda, appealing to manufacturing workers and communities hit by globalization. Critics, however, saw the national security rationale as a pretext, warning it set a dangerous precedent for executive overreach. The move sparked immediate legal challenges, questioning whether imports from allies like Canada and the EU truly threatened U.S. security. The stage was set for a protracted legal battle over the limits of presidential power. Today's ruling is the culmination of that fight. The Trump-era tariffs had real, measurable impacts on the U.S. economy. By 2020, they amounted to an $80 billion tax increase, raising prices on goods from washing machines to cars. While the steel industry saw a brief boost, downstream manufacturers faced higher costs, and job losses far outpaced gains. Retaliatory tariffs from China and others devastated U.S. agriculture, with soybean exports to China plummeting over 70% in a year. The government spent $28 billion in aid to offset farm losses, evidence of self-inflicted economic wounds. The trade deficit in goods actually widened as importers shifted supply chains to countries like Vietnam and Mexico. The tariffs rearranged global trade flows but failed to meaningfully revive U.S. manufacturing. The data tells a story of unintended consequences and economic disruption. Visualizing trade before and after the tariffs reveals dramatic shifts. The once dominant U.S.-China trade corridor shrank, while new routes to Vietnam, Thailand, and Mexico thickened as companies sought alternatives. Nearshoring production to Mexico intensified, fragmenting global supply chains. Industry data shows China's share of U.S. solar panel imports plummeted, replaced by South Korea, Vietnam, and Malaysia. The reliance on foreign production remained, just with new players. Maps of the U.S. showed deep economic pain in farm states hit by retaliation, while steel-producing regions saw some gains. The trade war created clear winners and losers, deepening regional divides. The visual evidence is clear: tariffs didn't end imports. They just changed the map. The complexity of global supply chains only increased. The policy's impact was uneven, fueling political and economic tensions. The story is one of adaptation, not restoration. The tariff debate split the nation. Supporters in manufacturing saw tariffs as a lifeline, arguing they leveled the playing field and revived American industry. For them, it was about national pride and reclaiming lost jobs. Critics, ranging from tech giants to farmers, called tariffs a tax on Americans, disrupting supply chains and alienating allies. A steel CEO might tout reopened mills, while a soybean farmer saw their market vanish overnight. The policy's blunt force created collateral damage, especially in agriculture and tech. Diplomatic fallout was severe, straining relationships with key partners. The fight over tariffs became a battle over America's economic identity. The legal battle was led by steel importers and trade groups, arguing Trump's use of Section 232 was an abuse of power. They claimed the law required a direct link between imports and national security threats, one the administration failed to prove. The government argued for broad presidential authority, but the court disagreed. The Federal Circuit ruled the administration overstepped, failing to meet statutory requirements and stretching national security too far. The decision emphasized Congress's constitutional role in regulating commerce and rejected the idea of unlimited executive power. The court reinforced the separation of powers, drawing a clear line against legislative overreach by the president. Overturning the tariffs, the judiciary reasserted its role as a check on executive authority. The ruling is a landmark in the ongoing struggle over who controls U.S. trade policy. The ruling throws U.S. trade policy into chaos, abruptly invalidating billions of dollars in tariffs that had been imposed over recent years. This seismic shift opens the door to a wave of refund lawsuits as affected companies scramble to reclaim money paid under now illegal duties. The Treasury Department now faces staggering financial and administrative challenges, with the prospect of processing thousands of complex refund claims and managing the sudden loss of tariff revenue. Across the country, companies are mobilizing legal teams and reviewing customs records, seeking to recover paid duties and minimize financial losses. More importantly, the decision fundamentally shifts power over trade back to Congress, restoring a constitutional balance that had tilted toward the executive branch. The president's ability to act unilaterally on trade is now sharply curtailed, requiring more oversight and input from lawmakers. Future trade disputes will demand greater collaboration, negotiation, and transparency between the executive and legislative branches, making swift action less likely. Both branches must now work together to craft trade policy, increasing accountability and public debate. Internationally, the ruling reassures U.S. allies and trading partners who had grown wary of unpredictable tariff actions. It signals a return to a more stable, rules-based approach, strengthening America's credibility on the world stage. For industries that benefited from tariffs, such as steel, manufacturing, and agriculture, the loss of protection is a major blow, threatening jobs and investment in vulnerable sectors. This outcome is already sparking new lobbying efforts in Congress, as affected groups push for alternative protections or relief. The debate over protectionism versus free trade is reignited, with passionate arguments on both sides. Now, these critical decisions move from the White House to Capitol Hill, where public scrutiny and political negotiation will shape the future. The court's decision doesn't end the controversy. It simply changes the venue, setting the stage for new legal and political battles. The U.S. must now navigate a new era of trade policymaking, adapting to shifting global dynamics and domestic pressures. The balance of power has shifted, demanding compromise and careful negotiation. Yet despite these changes, the underlying tensions and divisions over America's trade future remain unresolved. In the aftermath, the administration faces tough choices: appeal to the Supreme Court or accept the new limits on executive power. Businesses scramble to claim refunds while supply chains, painstakingly diversified, face new uncertainty. The White House must craft a new trade strategy, relying on negotiation and cooperation rather than unilateral action. The ruling vindicates critics of executive overreach and energizes political debate ahead of elections. Supporters of tariffs decry judicial activism, framing the decision as a blow to American workers. Congress now bears the responsibility for trade policy, forced to confront the challenges the tariffs tried to address. Bipartisan cooperation will be essential, but difficult. The court clarified who holds the power, but not how to solve the underlying problems. The legislative branch is now on the clock. The future of American trade is up for debate. Today's Supreme Court ruling marks a pivotal turning point, fundamentally redefining the scope of presidential power over trade policy in the United States. This decision sets U.S. trade on a dramatically new course, with far-reaching implications for businesses, workers, and consumers across the nation. The court declared the national emergency tariffs unconstitutional, challenging the executive branch's authority to impose sweeping trade barriers without congressional approval. This move effectively invalidates a core America First policy, signaling a major shift in how trade decisions are made at the highest levels. The fallout has been significant. Higher consumer costs, empty shelves, and global supply chain upheaval have all become part of the new reality. Now, the authority over trade policy shifts back to Congress, reigniting debates over the nation's economic direction. For critics, the decision is a victory, affirming that tariffs are an illegal tax when imposed without the consent of Congress. Internationally, this ruling may help repair strained alliances and open the door to renewed cooperation with key trading partners. It could also restore a more collaborative, multilateral approach to global trade, benefiting both the U.S. and its allies. The era of the president as tariff man may be over, but the underlying issues, globalization, job loss, and unfair trade practices, remain deeply unresolved. The debate now moves to Congress, where lawmakers must grapple with competing interests and visions for America's economic future. The path forward is uncertain, as the nation stands at a crossroads between protectionism and free trade. The court has clarified who holds the power to decide trade policy, but it has not provided answers on what the next steps should be or how to resolve the complex challenges ahead. America now faces a critical choice about its economic future, with stakes higher than ever for families, businesses, and the global economy. The question now is clear. Can a divided government come together to forge a new consensus for U.S. trade in an increasingly complex and interconnected world?